Okay, now, call the meeting to order. I have about 3 minutes past 7. First order of business, we have 2 sets of minutes if we can tonight. Actually, we can tonight. So we have minutes of June 6, 2017. First to approve. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the minutes of June 6, 2017 with corrections thereto.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Page 1. Page 2. Page 3.
So I have under 8 residential expired permit policy, the second paragraph. So it should say, Teresa Zitrich asked why the alternative maintenance cost sizing provided, which shows lower maintenance costs versus the town's own sizing, has no effect on the analysis. It does have an effect on the magnitude of the maintenance costs since there are varying numbers of neighborhoods being sized for maintenance costs.
So you wanted to add those words to the...
Yeah, unfortunately, because it's just, it's kind of like a soundbite, right? It doesn't really, it doesn't have any meaning the way it's written there.
Okay.
I will add, just for the record, that the town staff's positions in the minutes are articulated absolutely perfectly. So they're absolutely perfect, and most of the, I just noticed that most of the comments by the select board were kind of very short sound bites, so very short kind of partial sentences in some cases, not complete thoughts, where the staff opinions and positions were really articulated well, so.
So we'll have a chance to talk about that later on in the
Yeah.
agenda. So we're looking just for accuracy on the minutes as they stand right now, so we'll
So,
ask the
okay, yep, now,
words be added. Anything else on page 3?
yeah, nope, sorry.
Okay. Page 4, I just have one typo at the top lines. It says, Terry Zitrich said the perspective is one of equity and the benefit received. Form, it should be from utility fee.
I got that one too, yep.
Okay.
So-
Anything else on page 4?
I would just say that the paragraph that starts with Chris Belanger, it's just written really poorly. It's just, it's actually even hard to read, for me to read, so, but I think if you read it a couple times, you get it. It's just not drafted very well. I don't have an alternative draft, though. It's just poorly written.
Okay. Anything else on page 4? Page 5.
So there are some notes, since it's a legal document on page 5 from the very top. So the minutes say, starting at the bottom of page 4, James Sherrard pointed out the numbers provided from the town staff and stormwater professionals from the city of South Burlington. I didn't think for the analysis that Hoyle Tanner did that South Burlington provided any numbers, so how do we ask for a fact check? Because if these are legal minutes, I don't think that's accurate.
Unfortunately, there are many inaccurate statements that are made and that show up in the minutes. And I'm not talking about staff necessarily.
Yeah.
So I don't know where you draw the line on that, but
I think that's appropriately brought up in the agenda item that's later on this evening.
Yeah. So,
well, but I understand the question.
Yeah, the point is in the second one I have is in the same paragraph. It said the figures are supported by the consultant Hoyle Tanner, but I don't think there was any mention by Hoyle Tanner of the accuracy or validity of the maintenance cost, so. And then,
so the alternative is to just strike.
I would strike them, yeah. I think it would be fine to strike them, those sentences, because I don't think they're supported by fact, at least not that I know of.
So it's easier just to strike those words.
Yep. And the next part is, James Sherrard pointed out, a detailed analysis and discussion of inspections and quotes has been provided to the select board. It wasn't provided as part of the package for the Hoyle Tanner analysis, as part of the scope or part of the assumption. So if it's provided, it wasn't provided to the select board. I don't know when or where it was provided. I actually asked during the meeting, but it wasn't noted here in the minutes.
So would you like to strike those words also?
Yeah, I think it would be fine to strike that. And then, sorry, on the next, there was continued discussion of getting further information, rescinding the current policy and adopting a new policy. Staff will get quotes on brush hogging, dredging, and inspection, but I didn't see those in the package, the agenda package, Rick. And the next part is Jeff Fares asked for a modification to the table titled Ratepayers Estimated Payment to be included in the all-in option. And I didn't see that in the package either, so just from a
You
minute
can strike those as well, and if that,
to you.
So are you suggesting we strike those words also?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on page 5? If there's no further corrections, then all those in favor of approving the minutes of June 6, 2017 as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And no abstentions. So we'll move on to the minutes then of June 20th, 2017. Is there a motion?
I move to adopt the minutes of June 20th, 2017 with any amendments thereto.
Is there a second?
Second.
Page 1.
One quick question on page 1, under number 4, board interviews, appointments. Did we interview Ben King? I just can't remember. I know he was here.
no.
Okay, he was here because of a different reason.
And we also had a,
Okay, it was just yeah.
He was initially interviewed when he was appointed to the planning commission. He was not interviewed when the board appointed him to the,
Okay, great. I just remember him being here. I couldn't remember if he was interviewed or not.
Seems like you made note of that during the meeting as well.
Yes.
That wasn't necessary.
Anything else on page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5.
Wait a second, you mean I picked up on a typo that nobody else picked up on? That's it. I'm like flabbergasted.
Wow.
That's good.
No, I'm amazed at yeah. You guys made my evening, thank you for that.
heading, that's why I didn't pick it.
And page 6.
Sorry, 2 things on page 6, I think both of them, actually 3 things, hopefully are all minor. Number 17 continues over from page 5, and the last bullet that's on page 6 reads, thank you note and a $200 donation were received. And I'm wondering if we should either identify that it was from a resident or whether we should identify who the resident was. I mean, that's pretty magnanimous, so I just think if, perhaps we should recognize who it was from.
Do we know?
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
It was,
Bill Skiff Jr.
yeah, well, I was going to say the third, Bill Skiff the third, I think it's, but either way, it's the son.
Yeah, so anyway, that would, I mean, it's pretty impressive, so.
Yes. So we'll identify the person then. Is he a junior or is?
I think it was Bill Skiff Jr.
Well, it's the younger, right? I don't know whether
Yeah.
it goes by junior or,
I don't
I
either.
always thought well, that could just be my nomenclature, you're right, I don't know.
Other two things.
Okay, under other business, dog park, the sentence that reads, "At this point in time there," and I think we should insert the words, "does not appear to be," because it makes it kind of sound definite. I realize "at this point" is a qualifier, but,
Actually, I would recommend that whole sentence be struck, to be honest.
okay, I'm
I would too, yeah.
okay. Good with that.
Good, okay.
Last but not least, it's under number 19, and it's under the discussion, and it actually is something I said. Jeff Fair's comment, he would prefer not listing a minimum cost of living adjustment, and I think it should say in the agreement, being, you know, of course, the police collective bargaining agreement. Just to clarify.
I think it's good clarification.
Good, thank you.
Anything else on page 6? If not, all those in favor of approving the minutes of June 20th, 2017 as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I'll have one abstention myself. So this is the time for a public comment. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to make any public comment on anything? Yes, sir. If you just identify yourself.
I wanted to correct a statement that was made last time I was here by Mr. Schreier. I want to make it clear that there's no lien on our house, and there's no lien on any of the houses in our neighborhood due to stormwater issues. I don't know if there's any liens on any of the houses in your neighborhood.
Fairly certain there are, they just think.
So I don't know how, where he gets that kind of information, but there's no lien on our house. At the last meeting, it was said that the town staff was in possession of several estimates to back up the numbers that they were producing for maintenance. Rick provided me with the estimates, and one of those estimates was from Engineers Construction, whom I work for, and it was for a pond that has not been maintained regularly. One of the things that you guys did when you enacted the stormwater policy is when you take over a pond, it has to have access. It's very important to have access, and there's other criteria, but the point is here, Michael Drescher produced this estimate, and the estimate total is for $26,000, and $18,495 of that is either dealing with access issues, because there is none for this pond, or clearing and grubbing. And if there's a pond that's been maintained, there should be no clearing and grubbing. So I'm going to state that this estimate, as well as the one from Dirt Tech, does not represent the stormwater ponds that are going to be taken over by the town. There's also an estimate for bush hogging. And one of the things this estimate says is estimate for bush hogging with tracked skid steer to clear brush around stormwater pond. If a stormwater pond has been maintained, there's not going to be any brush around the pond. So this estimate for $800 isn't valid either for the stormwater ponds that you're going to be taking over. So I do realize that you guys are already entrenched in the way you feel about this, and you know, I'm going to respect that, but I just want to make it clear that there is an appearance that some of you are making decisions on really poor information, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there any other person who wishes to make any public comment tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Catamount Forest Study Committee charge revision. At the last meeting, you had discussion on increasing the number of folks to be part of the committee, and there's some recommendations from Rick. Perhaps you'd like to explain your recommendations, Rick?
So it's pretty simple. We're increasing the number, and the wording shows up on page 2, section 3. It said, I think, I forget, I don't have the wording, the original wording in front of me, but right now it says up to 13.
So does that cover just the number of people who volunteered so far?
Well, it depends. There's one individual who I'm not necessarily recommending the board appoint, and if that's the case, then you have 12 members. If you do appoint them, that would make 13.
So, my only thought is should we make it 15, just because,
Yeah, a little bit of leeway.
yeah, rather than having to do this another time. So, I move to revise the
We need a
charge.
motion. I think we need a motion, first of all,
Oh,
to accept a recommendation, then to make an amendment to it.
I don't think there's a motion pending, Mr. Chair.
There is not.
So she's making a motion.
yeah.
Motion to, well, motion
I'm-
to
I think she's going to do exactly the proposed motion, but with the number 15.
adopt, the change in the number.
Yep.
Yes.
I move to revise the change to the Catamount Forest Study Committee by increasing the maximum number of members to 15.
Second.
So we have motion made and second. Is there any discussion on the motion?
No, I like the idea of a little bit of leeway.
Do we have to have up to 15, or
No,
just
it
allows
says-
us up to?
So it consists of up to.
I get concerned with the group getting too big and then not being able to make decisions. That's my only
Right.
concern.
It'll be up to us to appoint anyway, so.
That's true,
yes.
sorry, thank you.
Sure. So if there's no other further discussion, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And no abstentions? Good, that takes care of that. So we need to do, if we need to go and do board interviews and appointments. Is Jeff Dickinson in here tonight? Good, okay. Jeff, why don't you come up to the table here? We do have your application submitted to us, and perhaps you would give briefly a little more information perhaps on your interest in the serving on the committee and some of your background.
Sure. My name is Jeff Dickinson. I am an abutting landowner. My home is at 845 South Michigan Road. The house is the second iteration of the Catamount Nordic Ski Lodge. So I live in the log cabin that used to be part of Catamount. I started mountain biking at Catamount in 1994 or so I have 20 plus years of experience with the facility. Was not really looking for a house at the time when I found this one, thumbing through a real estate magazine. I've always loved the area. Took a chance on taking a look at the place and sort of, love at first sight if it is possible. Unique opportunity to live in a pretty special place. So I have since gotten married there. I have a 10-month-old son now, so we have a family in that space. So I feel like a vested interest in everything that's going on around it. Background-wise, I grew up in Colchester. I'm a Vermonter local. Went to Colchester High School, went to Linden State College. I'm a graphic designer of 20 years. Worked in Burlington. Love riding my bike and being outside.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Jeff?
No, I just love the story. It's a great story.
What's your vision for Catamount, if any?
I love what it is. I think there's a lot of potential there also. I don't have any intimate knowledge of the Catamount organization. I've never been involved with the nonprofit, other than a participant in the facilities. But when I first started mountain biking there, I was doing they were Monday night races at the time, and there were 200 or 300 people that would come race on a Monday night, and there were cars filling both parking lots and down the road, and now they're lucky to get 100. I don't exactly know why, but I feel like that potential is still there. And I know that, things, they could get the bodies back in there to increase attendance, get more interest in it. I think it's a hidden gem, to be honest. I think the majority of Chittenden County residents don't even know it exists. I mean, I'm sorry. I didn't know it existed until I was 22 years old and I grew up in Colchester. I never knew it was out here. I wasn't a cross-country skier. I know that was a big, their big draw at the time, but, they were much bigger in the 70s when, when we actually had winters and it snowed regularly but, I just think there's a huge amount of potential to grow what's already there.
What do you think about mixed use?
As far as long as it's in a recreational standpoint, I'm open to whatever, as long as there are people outside getting fresh air and smiling, I'm open. It's better than a housing development, in my opinion.
Any further questions?
My question would have been along the lines of, and I think you've done a pretty good job of explaining it, so I'm not sure how much more you can add, is, what would you bring to the committee? And I think you've talked about your interests. It's really been a focus on mountain biking. Full disclosure, I'm a mountain biker, and I do ride at Catamount to do the training races. You probably passed me. But I guess my question is more along the lines of, kind of what else? Because I think mountain biking maybe could be, maybe even should be, continue to be a part of the picture, but I think, I'm trying to think of how to best put this. Because it will be town-owned, that can't be the only focus. And so I'm just, you talked a little bit with Terry's question, just sort of your thoughts about that. Mountain biking can't be the only.
No, I mean, I think anything, I'm open to anything, honestly. My wife and I went to Somerville last weekend. They do this event at the Intervale where they bring in a bunch of local food vendors and a band and all this stuff. And it's the first time I'd ever been to that event also. And there were, a couple hundred people that went down there, and parking is very limited. It's kind of a little bit out of the way. And I said to Sarah on the way out, I was like, Catamount could do something like this. They've got the space, they've got the land, and I know they tried to host the farmer's market last year or the year before, and it didn't really pan out. And, again, I don't know the reasons behind that, but I feel like there's a marketing issue is their biggest problem. People don't know they're there, and they don't make that extra quarter-mile trip down that dirt road to figure out what's there. And I just feel like there's so many opportunities, and so much of it would have, I feel like, little impact on the few residents that are there. I mean, I'm fine with a few more cars driving down the road. I love seeing when events are going on there. I love seeing that place packed. I mean, I like seeing the parking lot full and people taking advantage of that space. So whether it's mountain biking or running or hiking or charity events or, a bluegrass festival or whatever, I'm pretty open. I don't know that there would be a whole lot that, unless you're going to bring Aerosmith in to do a hillside concert, although I'd probably be into that too, but.
Okay, you had me going there till you mentioned Aerosmith, but.
You just got me.
Any further questions?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Thank you. So, last week, or 2 weeks ago, you interviewed Court Longenbach, and there's a motion proposed to appoint two people, and a second motion that we should have a discussion on. But
I move to appoint Jeff Dickinson and Court Logenbach to the Catamount Community Forest Study Committee.
is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion?
No, I think they'll both be good.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Congratulations, you're on. So,
Thank you all.
so the next point is whether or not we would appoint the state forester to be a member of the committee, or whether he would just be a member of a consultant, as a consultant basis. Any thoughts on that? It's Ethan Tapper.
Yeah.
So what's the recommendation from,
Well, we have two, is to appoint him as a voting member, and staff is recommending that we appoint him as a technical advisor. Is that correct? That was my
Not exactly. It's close. The recommendation, my recommendation is that he not be appointed at all. But he will guarantee be serving as a technical advisor, as will a number of other people.
Okay.
is there a reason why?
I don't see why, first of all, he's not a town resident. But secondly, why would we appoint one technical advisor when there's a whole host of others that are going to be participating? I just don't see the rationale why this one is different than the others.
Okay, but I meant by advisor, and technical advisor would be the same as Andrea Shortsleeve and Kate Wanner, is that pronounce her name right?
And there'll be others. Our Public Works Director might be involved, our Recreation Director. There'll be a number of different technical advisors, our Finance Director. I don't see a need to appoint any of those individuals.
Okay, I think the point with him is we are creating a town forest, and he is the county forester, so you can see the connection there.
Right, which is why the Conservation Commission, I'm sure, made that recommendation, but anyway, I don't feel strongly about it, but it just seemed odd that we appoint one technical advisor.
Jeff, if I remember correctly, it seemed like there was a lot of discussion when we had public comment on this about it being Williston residents. That seemed to be very important to Willistonians that we do that. And since he's going to be involved in other aspects, that's something we should consider in making a decision.
And I certainly don't disagree or am particularly worried about whether he's a technical advisor or a member. I think maybe if I could take the devil's advocate position would be is we want to create this as a town forest, and so there are going to be certain requirements that have to be met, I'm sure, to do that. And whereas the committee is largely lay people in terms of forestry issues, he is I assume he's an expert. He's the county forester. So there could be an argument why it may make sense for
I
having.
don't particularly have strong feelings one way or another. I just was noting what that was, that public comment that they said.
Yeah.
And I guess part of me is going, since he's going to be involved or most likely consulted, I wonder if that alleviates your concern at all.
Oh, I'm happy both ways, because if it comes to us, once this document is created, and it comes to us and we know there's this controversy, they voted against the recommendations of the county forester, we'll have to have a discussion about that. So that's part why I'm good either way.
He mentions on his application that he is the Chittenden County Forester and so involved by statute in the management of municipal forests in Williston. So he's going to be involved whether we want him to or not, actually.
If we create the municipal forest, right, he would be involved
Yes.
at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So,
Right, but this,
after the fact.
right, that's the point, before the fact versus after the fact. Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Then I'd rather leave that spot open in case there's another Williston
Yep.
resident that has a strong, that's just me.
The vast majority are Williston residents. Again, I'm good either way. So it sounds to me like there's maybe a loose consensus to keep the technical people as advisors. I say they're advisors, they're not members, and to keep residents as the members.
I like that, yeah.
Okay?
Actually,
Then, sounds like we have a motion, somebody.
Lacking a motion to appoint him as a member, we would
I see, okay.
just move on.
Okay, I get it.
Okay, so we'll move on then to the neighborhood stormwater grant policy, which has been revised, and James Sherrard, stormwater coordinator, is here, I'm sure to explain what we're looking at.
Sure. Evening. What we're looking at here is, I believe, the final iteration of a grant policy. Just reading the abstract for you, the policy is intended to establish general guidelines for a neighborhood stormwater grant program intended to equitably distribute any grant funds received by the town for neighborhood stormwater. In other words, we want to be able to apply for grants to raise funds to help neighborhoods participating in our Allenbrook Flow Restoration Plan to get their projects in the ground as soon as possible. Since we'll be receiving those funds through the town, we need to have a way to equitably distribute them to each neighborhood. And this policy here puts forth a method of doing that and an allocation method, which has kind of been the last sticking point. And the final allocation method decided upon at our last select board meeting that we discussed this was a even split of impervious acres treated and estimated construction cost. Taking those splits, we ended up with an allocation table, which is shown on page 4. And that's the distribution allocation for all the participating neighborhoods. I'm not going to get into too much of the detail of the grant policy unless you'd like to in this introduction, but long story short, if over a period of years we get $100,000 worth of grants, South Ridge neighborhood would get $12,000. They'd get $12,000 of the allocation. And you can see that here in the 12% distribution allocation. Happy to discuss it in more detail, but it's where the grant policy stands.
One important point is that when we were looking at construction cost, we found it problematic to take the actual construction cost, because we won't know that until each project's completed. And some of these projects, it could be 10 years or so before they're completed. So we chose instead to select the construction estimates that were part of the engineering feasibility analysis, because we know those numbers now. And that's one of the big decisions.
So what happens if the estimates are significantly different than the actual cost? Is there any equalization at the end or no? Wow. So,
It makes it very complicated to base it on actual construction.
I know our estimates, we've gotten, and I know Myra might have as well, gotten some quotes in other neighborhoods. We had like a 2x difference between the low quote and the high quote. So we had a low quote of around 30,000 and a high quote of around 60.
What was the EFA estimate?
40. I just don't know,
Yeah.
because if we give over the quote process to the town, what control will we have to?
The quotes were not prepared by the town. They were prepared, the cost estimates here were prepared by the engineers who put together the EFAs. So town staff didn't pull those together.
No, it's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying we will, I think if we join the grant policy, then the town will manage the process for securing bids.
Not necessarily.
Oh, no?
No, not necessarily. The stipulation is that the purchasing process that is used by a neighborhood has to be consistent with the town's purchasing policy.
That would be perfectly fine.
And we've already reviewed 2 different neighborhoods who have gone to bid, and they've used engineers, and those engineers are familiar with municipal purchasing policies, and they've met our requirements.
And to be clear, that's only if we submit a grant in the name of your neighborhood. If there's a neighborhood that chooses to construct their system on their own, they don't need to meet our purchasing policy, and they'll still be part of this grant policy.
Right.
The only situation in which a neighborhood would no longer be eligible for these funds is if they choose to exit out of the program entirely, not build their systems the way we talked about it, and get processed by the state through residual designation authority. No one wants that.
And that requirement that they meet town purchasing policy is actually a requirement of the grants.
Exactly.
By the state. It's not, so that's why we're in that position.
And we're having two parallel conversations here. One is this grant policy of how we can distribute the funds, and the other is actually something I should have mentioned in my introduction. Town staff has recently submitted 6 grants to the state from the 6 neighborhoods that were interested in participating in this round of grant funding, which I thought was an excellent turnout, and ended up being a pretty big number worth of funds that we've thrown our name into the hat for. So we've had a lot of these discussions with Heritage Meadows and Old Stage Estates, a number of other neighborhoods, about sort of more of the nuances of how to work through this particular grant process.
So I have, after last week's, or I guess it was the 6th, when we discussed this last, I went back and crunched some numbers, and one of the things that bothered me is we use the construction cost for the neighborhood as, right, correct? For the neighborhood, not the per homeowner construction cost, right?
That's the direction we received from the
Right,
board.
exactly. I think that was the way the options were laid out to us. And I wanted to see, because really, at the end of the day, the burden is on the homeowner. And if you have a huge construction cost, but you have a lot of homeowners, the burden per homeowner is still lower. So I went and ran it by burden by homeowner, 50%, and then 50% impervious surface, kind of in the same guise as we did. And many of the neighborhoods come out the same, but there's a few who were kind of at the bottom of the pile come out significantly better. So for instance, like Turtle Pond, they went from, let me see my numbers here. Turtle Pond went from 1.3% to 3.6%. So it was kind of the ones that either had very low, because Turtle Pond, I think, has 9 houses. So they have a few houses. Their bill's not large, but the bill per homeowner is bigger than some others. So it's like twice what some of the other neighborhoods are, because they have many, many homes. So I thought it was a better number to use. I'm not excited about basing all this in quotes, but I understand the complication.
Well, the point I'd like to make about that, because I have been involved in grants on the state side of things, and I mean, that is common, that they base it on anticipated cost, because it is the best available information. And then once the grants are made, there really is not the opportunity to go back and adjust them based on, let's say, real or actual bid values. That's just, I guess, if you will, that's one of the liabilities of grant programs, is you just can't do that. To your second point, interesting information, I picked up on, there's one neighborhood that gets 0, and I kind of have a little bit of difficulty with that.
Which one?
That's
Pleasant Acres. And I think it's because maybe of a rounding, is it? Because the way it rounds. And again, having dealt with grant programs, one option is to set a minimum.
They only have $4,600 in construction cost.
But they have cost.
so
And
it's a fraction.
I get.
So if I were to bring out the decimal point, they would be getting something.
I get it. It just, to me, conceptually, I have a little bit of difficulty when we have a grant program for all municipalities that are incurring costs, except in your case, you don't get any because you're so one option would be to set a minimum amount. Maybe the minimum amount is 3%. I don't know. I don't want to throw out a number, but
That would kind of, you'd have to figure out how you would factor that into a formula.
right. If I was, conceptually, I just have a little bit of difficulty with this, because.
No, I understand. I wanted to, one of the things I left with a little heartburn, and that is the overall construction cost and not taking into account the homeowner burden.
Yeah.
Because overall construction cost is kind of meaningless without looking at the homeowner burden, so. And it doesn't change most of the numbers. For instance, like Meadow Ridge got 30.6% before, and they go to 28.3%. And that's mostly because, some of the other neighborhoods almost had nothing, so.
They actually drop down to 28% if we stick with whole numbers on the percentage.
Versus 30, right?
Right.
Yep,
So,
yep.
but they have a large bill.
They do, yeah, they do.
That is significant from their standpoint.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I don't know if there's any thought.
I mean, I think your point about the impact is felt by the homeowners, so it's that cost per homeowner that,
That's really the cost we should have used. We just didn't have it at our disposal at the meeting.
we gave James and Rick's direction to use cost, and now we're refining it a little bit further.
Also, the list of options is what the board had given us too, so,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and I don't disagree at all, that
mean, this-
I would, if I was making a decision, I would have based it on the per home cost rather than total construction cost. But there is a fair amount of proximity, as Teresa mentioned, between the two methods anyway.
It does, most of the numbers, they come out pretty close, but I think some of the ones that,
Philosophically, I'm with you. I see the benefit, and I'm good with asking staff, to prepare the next version of this that does that.
Does what?
Oh, bases, Appendix B Appendix A on, instead of estimated construction cost, on estimated construction cost per household. Does that make sense?
I can share how I did it, looked at it. I'm sure you could figure it out
It's
too.
We have the numbers already.
It's a pretty easy, yeah.
Calculated from day one, pretty much, so.
I just apologize for
I did like
taking 2 weeks
10
to
different options myself.
get that to staff.
Administratively, what happens if we don't approve this policy tonight?
This will kick into gear when we need to start allocating funds. We do have 2 neighborhoods that have completed construction but haven't finalized the legal agreements to actually hand over the systems to us. Even if that were to happen tomorrow, which it's not likely to, we would just pend distribution of funds until they hand over their system and we're awarded a grant. Maybe I should have led with that. We haven't received any grant funds yet, so we have nothing to reallocate. So those are the 2 things that need to happen. We need to get grant funds and someone needs to hand their system over to us. That's not likely to happen in the next month. It's not likely to happen in the next 2 months, but an understanding of how it's going to be distributed would be helpful moving forward.
That would be my suggestion, is we table this until we get the next revision that includes what we just talked about.
If it's, I'm not opposed to it, as long as we're not missing a deadline or throwing a hammer in there.
We're moving forward applying for grants. We did this grant round. We're looking at whether the next rounds are applicable. So we're moving forward as if this is all going to work out. We're going to get this figured out.
When is the next round? Because, for our neighborhood, as you know, we were interested because I wanted to make sure you had a good number of neighborhoods involved in submitting grants. But we have the limitation that our HOA bylaws don't allow us to loan money without we think, a supermajority vote of the homeowners. So the board itself can't approve loaning funds. So we actually have to have an HOA meeting, and potentially, we're trying to get a legal opinion on this, maybe a supermajority.
Say loan, you mean borrow funds?
Did I say?
You said loan.
Borrow.
To answer your question about the rounds, this last round we applied to was the ERP, System Restoration Program grants. This is actually a rolling grant process for the first time. So what they have are review deadlines. So our last application met the very first review deadline. So we got 6 in for the very first push of review. We can send in applications continuously for that particular grant program until the funds dry up. Other grants have begun to come out. I'm not sure if they'll fit our particular need, but we're assessing them, and those could happen intermittently. So that's kind of my answer for you.
Aren't there some in August, the transportation grant program?
You're right, the transportation grant is due August 15th. We're assessing whether that's a good fit for us. There are strict requirements to how much town highway you're treating, and you need to make sure you're treating a certain percentage in order to really even make those funds valid. Also getting into that a little bit more, that transportation funds have a lot more red tape associated with them, and you're almost guaranteed to increase construction costs by, say, 5 to 10%. And if you're only getting a 1, 2, 5, 10% benefit from our allocation, you then need to have a discussion of, is it worth it to seek those funds? So that's why particular grant programs may or may not be suitable for our needs.
Do you mind me asking, sorry, a detailed question? Is that because there are federal dollars involved? Yeah.
Whenever you get, so I'm speaking as a general rule of thumb for, if Bruce was here, I think he'd say something similar. When you're dealing with transportation funds, you want to get larger grants. If you're getting a $300,000 grant, it absolutely makes sense to, increase the cost by 10% because you're getting a fair amount of money. But if you're looking for $20,000 and you increase the cost of everything by $5,000, then that sort of ratio doesn't really fit.
Makes total sense to me.
I heard a suggestion, but not a motion, that we postpone action on this policy until we have some different information.
I move that we postpone going forward with the current grant policy until James Sherrard presents us with another set of estimates for distribution of funds based on 50% impervious surface and 50% homeowner construction cost burden.
Second.
May I jump in?
Well, let's get a second to the motion and then see if you have something else to add to it.
I'll second.
All right, James, what you had?
I'll be doing these calculations by unit. It's maybe a nuanced thing to say, but condominium associations isn't going to necessarily be a homeowner, and a lot of the numbers we calculated were based on unit. Again, maybe not a big deal, but we're going to do cost per unit as opposed to cost per house.
Oh,
So I'd make a friendly amendment that instead of house, it is unit.
okay.
Acceptable to the maker of the motion? Is that acceptable to the maker of the motion?
Yes, absolutely, yep.
So is there any further discussion on the
Just
motion?
before, do we need a motion? Do we need to pass a
No,
motion?
but it's been made.
No, but we have one now.
Say that you-
Here we are.
Yeah, all right.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So we'll move on to the residential expired permit policy, which we have, we approved some time ago, and at the last meeting, we discussed these kind of things. There was sort of a consensus that we were happy with what we had. Perhaps, James, you could refresh us in our viewing audience as to what we're talking about.
The residential expired permit policy is the policy that's been put forth to allow the town of Williston to take over the permitting responsibilities for those expired permits in the Allen Brook watershed, which are participating in the Allen Brook Flow Restoration Plan. If that's not clear enough, I can get more into that, but basically, all the neighborhoods that are participating with us have completed something called an EFA, an engineering feasibility analysis, and we've agreed to that. We've then executed legal agreements saying if you build your improvements in accordance with what those EFAs said, the town of Williston will take that system over in perpetuity, and by take over, we're basically absorbing or incorporating that into our general permit. And then all upgrade and maintenance costs are the responsibility of the town from that point forward. The cost to construct those improvements remain those of the neighborhood. That is the policy we have in place.
Thank you. So if we decide that we want to rescind the policy, the motion would be in order for that. If we want to leave the policy as it is, there's no motion that needs to be made. Questions?
Well, I guess I'll start, and I expressed this last meeting, and after 2 weeks or so of thinking about it, my mind hasn't changed, and that is, to me, there are two major takeaways from this whole process so far. The first is that we should include neighborhoods with valid permits in addition to those with expired permits. And the second is option one, which is exactly what James just explained, is a good deal. I understand it's still a significant cost. I get that. I understand. I've listened and I've heard. But I still think that I can't say the word forever, is a very good deal. Thank you. When all construction, maintenance, and permitting costs go away, because the permit from the homeowners association has gone away and is now a town permit.
Yeah,
That's it, that's
we
me.
done? Okay, so I think it should be rescinded and redone for a couple of different reasons. One is the one that I share with Jeff, and that is that we need to treat all the homeowners the same, and homeowners associations aren't really equipped to manage these stormwater ponds, and I think the Hoyle Tanner actually said it well, that the town has the expertise to maintain these things, and, you know, those homeowners who have stormwater systems that they have to maintain themselves are not being treated the same as those homeowners that have expired permits. So I think we should cover both. There's a model out there, it's South Burlington's system. I know not everybody agrees that South Burlington is the same as Williston, but when I look at their policy and I look at the applicability to Williston, it's the same. To me, they're the same, and it's a working model that's been in place for, 11, 12 years. New York City is different than Williston. South Burlington is not. And the other part that I'm pretty passionate about is that, you know, a big part of the expense of upgrading the stormwater systems in the neighborhoods is due to public roads. The public road runoff is 40% of the impervious surface for most of the stormwater systems. And for that reason, the town should accept the financial responsibility for upgrading the systems for that town road, public road, stormwater runoff, which I feel is one of the main reasons we have a stormwater policy and a stormwater fee, is to take care of the public systems, of which these roads are in all of these neighborhoods. So,
Further questions or comments?
The only comment I'd make is I spoke extensively about this on June 6th. I don't feel the need to rehash it. I am not in favor of changing the policy, and I would refer anybody to my June 6th comments and Public Access TV if they want to see my wonderful rhetoric.
So if a motion has been made, there's one proposed by the town manager in his report for rescinding.
I have a motion.
You may.
So I move to rescind the Select Board policy on residential expired stormwater permits adopted on May 18th, 2015, and request staff prepare a revised policy based on the town taking responsibility for the proportion of stormwater system upgrade costs associated with town roads runoff, and also based on the town taking over the maintenance of non-expired stormwater systems as long as they meet the current stormwater standards. A policy which provides a more equitable solution across all neighborhoods in Williston.
So is there a second to the motion? Hearing no second, and the motion dies due to a lack of a second. It appears then that since we don't need a motion to do anything further on that, the existing policy stands. So we'll move on then to the VAST agreement. And you have a copy of that in front of you, Rick. I presume this is almost identical to what we've agreed to in the past.
Yes, this is, I think there've been a few minor changes as recommended by the Conservation Commission and staff. It's been reviewed by the Conservation Commission, and it's an agreement that has worked well for many, many, many years.
Are there any questions for Rick about the proposed agreement?
Has this been running for some time?
Oh, yeah.
So it's the same group, this Williston Hawks, it's a yearly thing?
I don't know how long they've been around, but I know that they've been around longer than I've been manager, and that's been.
I was going to say the same thing.
And they're always well-behaved, they are
Yeah.
held to the same kind of noise and other kinds of standards, ordinances and stuff.
We've never had a problem. that I know of.
Right. I don't think we've ever received a complaint
No.
that I'm aware of.
I had one issue once.
Okay.
I had a run-in with one of the operators when I was cross-country skiing, but that was a minor thing.
I've actually had that happen, went over by a snowmobile.
And they, from what I can tell, are a very responsible group and an asset.
I just miss them coming in. They used to come in.
Yes,
every-
True,
thank
that's
you,
right.
right,
Here.
right.
Take us for granted.
I'm not going to prove it till they,
Yeah, I mean, forget it.
yeah. That's true, you're right.
And not just one person either, like
Right.
4 or 5 people would
Yeah.
show up.
Wow.
I mean, they maintain bridges, they maintain the trails, they police
they
the
provide a lot
trails,
of
they
value.
groom the trail. It's a lot. It's quite a,
Good, yeah.
I feel like we used to get flowers for our anniversary, and now we just get like a little card. That's what if we're going to be taken for granted, I guess it's still a good cause.
There's a proposed motion.
sure hope that makes the minutes.
Yeah.
I move to approve the use of public land by the Williston Hillhawks and the Vermont Association of Snow Travelers, and to authorize the manager to sign an agreement for such use for the 2017 to 2018 season.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We move on to the rules of transaction policy, and Rick has given us a lengthy memo regarding this issue. Perhaps you'd like to talk about that a little bit.
In the end, there is no easy way of trying to define what should be included in minutes and what isn't. The records or the information I searched online, there was no definitive anything. There were some general guidelines, and right now, the minutes are produced by a person who looks online, watches the minutes, or the meeting online, prepares the minutes, sends them off to me. I generally do very light editing. I mostly just check for typographical errors, and even some of those I miss. The one thing she struggles most often with is actually who was at the meeting, and that's where I can be of the biggest help. We've had a number of different clerks over the years, and I think this clerk does a pretty good job. I've had, at one point in the time I've been here, we had one clerk where I had to do extensive editing, and that is not the case here. So that's a good thing, but she's willing to do whatever the board wants as far as detail. And I did come up with some rough outline of possible guidelines, but it's got to be a work in progress, because there's no way you can identify every possible thing and say, well, this should be included, this shouldn't be. Maybe there is a way of doing it, but I haven't come up with something. So whatever direction the board wants to provide on the minutes, we'll be happy to try to accommodate.
The only thing, as I mentioned earlier, the only thing I didn't like, and it was primarily on the 6th minutes, and that was the fact that the comments from the select board were just little sound bites, and I know we talked more than just little sound bites. And then the comments, or I would say interruptions by James, I was actually going to send you a memo on that, but they were articulated in great elaborate detail, and I didn't understand it almost looked biased to me, kind of. It was, so that kind of thing is what bothers me more than being, we don't need to be verbose. In fact, probably not being verbose is good, but in that case, it was just glaringly obvious that there was some bias in the minutes, and I guess it's hard for me to understand that, so that's what bothers me.
The woman that produces them does minutes for lots of different boards all over the county, and, I can't account for that. It just,
Not a relative of,
it's actually, interestingly, it's someone that at one point served on this board as a select board member.
really?
I-
You can't say who it is?
Sure, it's Mary Ann Reardon.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if she was biased. I don't, it may appear so, and that.
Well, it was just odd, I just looked at this,
Yeah,
this is really,
yeah.
this is like the whole, 2 or 3 sentences that James articulated, and,
Yeah.
you got it like 5 words, and I got 6 words, and the positions weren't very articulate on the other side.
I think the discussion we had around the minutes today, it was great that we had that discussion, because it really points out, the longer the minutes, the more there is for interpretation or disagreement, or feeling like it didn't accurately state what you felt you said. And I'll add, we now have a digital recording if somebody has to ever go back and find out what exactly did Jeff Fair say about issue X. So I'm an advocate for really boiling it down as much as possible and capture maybe not even the discussion, just the kind of like the bullets, the titles of the discussion, what was discussed, and not getting into what was the discussion. Just, does that make sense, Rick? I see your.
Well, whatever the board wants.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm okay with that as long as it's balanced,
Yeah,
as
but
long as
that's-
it's a balanced.
Sure, I agree with that. But the issue is that, and I see this as a lawyer, I get a decision back from a judge, and I think, okay, was that guy even in the same room? Because, that's.
I know which judge you're talking about.
Well, there's a lot of them that can be, and but it turns out, it's like anything else, it's like a call in a sport where you say, that's crazy, but it turns out that everybody's trying to do their best, and and mistakes do get made, and something gets slanted when it shouldn't have. I think the best way to deal with that is when we review the minutes.
Did that today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole idea behind minutes is it's something similar to legislative history. Not exactly, but the idea is like this records what we did and what the votes were and what the motions were, and then that gets reflected in policies. The only there are times when, as an attorney, I've gone into the minutes of meetings for town government. It's really rare. And when I do, I'm just looking to see if the thing actually got passed. In other circumstances, I suppose it's possible to see, you'd want to know the motive behind something, but that's probably, as a matter of legal decision-making, that's really not going to be the most important thing. In terms of litigation, if we ever get sued for a civil rights thing, and I think the board did get sued before I got on. I know people were talking about depositions in some case.
It was a sewer allocation
Yeah,
case.
and I'm thinking, wow, if I ever got deposed about what happened in a select board meeting, I'd be like, I don't know, they all kind of blur into one after a while.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, I find that works in a lot of different contexts. But the point is that there is an electronic thing here. There's an electronic recording, and the minutes, if anything, are going to serve for somebody to say, okay, well, I'm going to be looking at a video. I've got the other thing on. I've got the minutes on my computer in a different window, and I can follow along to where I have to go on the video that's online, and anybody in the entire world, if they have the web, can see it. So I mean, I don't think we need to make it super extensive.
Yeah, just curious, how long are the videos kept?
So
Really?
far,
You're kidding, forever?
so far, until the meteor.
I'm okay, as long as it's, like I said, my only concern was balance, so as long as it's
Yeah.
balanced.
And those, I think, that can be addressed on a case-by-case basis if there's a problem.
Okay,
I think.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So I think we have pretty good consensus that we don't want,
Yeah, Rick, don't we?
we don't want.
Short and sweet.
Voluminous minutes.
So a little bit shorter than what we've been presenting, I guess, is.
Yes.
Right.
And maybe incorporating some of the guidelines or ideas that I've put
Do you want to go through your ideas, or did you,
to the board, if you feel it would be useful.
are these the Robert rules?
No. No. The rules are whatever the board wants, you can change it from meeting to meeting if you want, it just makes it much more difficult, and I'm sure the board wouldn't do that anyway, but,
I think you should do your minimum legal requirements unless otherwise something is needed to be longer. On page 4 of his memo.
Yeah, but if you look at what actually is in the rules of transmission, it is under 5.11, the document that Rick gave us a copy of. It's very concise, very short. It tells what should be in there and what, essentially what should be in there.
that's the minimum requirement.
Yes, those are minimum.
I think the board would not be comfortable with just the minimum, but
I like the idea of the bulletized points, these are the major discussion points. You don't have to put names, or you can just bulletize discussion points, and otherwise, we might have very short minutes, like I have a.
It's not a bad.
Yes, I'm not seeing a big problem with that.
Yeah, it's,
Yep.
as long as it has balance, I'm okay either way, so.
we'll try to tinker with them a little bit and try to make them a little bit shorter and see how the board likes that. If the board doesn't like it, then we can revisit that at some point in the future. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, good. So then we'll move on to the manager's report.
This is short. A reminder, we have a special meeting scheduled for Monday of next week. The sole purpose of that meeting is to talk about the comprehensive plan. And then the meeting after that is a regular meeting, and that's July 25th. That's 2 weeks from tonight.
And what time does the report, the Monday meeting start?
It's starting at 6, and dinner will follow fairly soon after the meeting starts, so you don't have to worry about rushing home and getting dinner and then getting to the meeting.
Perfect.
All right, we'll be in contact with you soon about dinner choices. I'm not quite sure what we're going to do yet, but we'll figure it out.
Here, correct?
Next door.
It'll actually be in the police station. We just,
I remember that.
we could have met here, but we wanted to try something. I know, it was a little bit smaller space, a little more intimate, and we wanted to do kind of a circular or rectangular shape, because the planning commission will be there, and the public's certainly allowed to be there as well. We can have some chairs set up then, but typically we don't have too many members of the public at these meetings. You can get kind of tiresome listening to all the technical discussion about the plan. Hopefully not for the board, though. Let's see. The final interviews for the chief of police position are being held this Friday. We have 2 board members who will be participating in that, Terry McKeag and Teresa. Ted Kenny was involved in the first round, which narrowed it down to 3 candidates. All 3 candidates are on board, and it'll be, for each candidate, the process will last between 4 and 5 hours. It'll be an interesting challenge for them to work through the process, and hopefully they'll learn something about the town as, at the same time, we're learning something about them. So we can make sure it's a good fit all the way around.
I'm gonna miss the current police chief. He's actually a good guy he's a very approachable guy, so he's,
Hopefully our new chief will be equally or better. Each person brings a different set of strengths and weaknesses to the job, so.
Did you tell us what he was going to do? Is he moving on to a different job, or is he just retiring?
Just retiring at this point. Well, towards the end of his tenure, we'll probably have some sort of reception for him, and that would be in September. That's all I have for this evening.
So we move on to other business. We do have a catering permit, I believe, to take care of.
This is, excuse me, for an event scheduled for August 12th on the Isham property in the barn. The caterer is Sugar Snap LLC, and it's for a wedding reception, and staff has no objections to the event.
Is there any questions for Rick regarding the current catering permit? If not, a motion would be in order.
Move we approve the permit.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion?
Put that in your minutes and smoke.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So next week, our goal is to complete our review of the plan. So, and to schedule a final public meeting, or authorize the scheduling of it. So my advice to everybody this week is to, between now and Monday, if you have questions that really need to be answered, get in touch with Ken Belleville. If you have disagreements with what's being proposed, please get in touch with him so we can utilize our time to the greatest extent and finish this up next Monday.
What happens, Terry, what's the procedure at the end of the review? Do we,
So if we have something to remand back to the planning commission, that'll be the time to do it. They will have to go through the same machinations that they did before of reviewing it, probably have a public hearing if they are going to change it, and they'll come back to the select board. If we have nothing to remand back to them, we would then call for a public hearing, a second public hearing on this, and hopefully approve the plan after that.
so we go through doing like a normal motion?
Yes.
Okay. So have we logged anything yet that we've asked the planning? I didn't think so.
I watched on TV the last meeting that you had, and there was nothing that was remanded back to them. We did nothing before that as well, so.
We're going to have that, I wrote you an email about getting a little sheet that just said, here's all of our changes. Great.
Yes.
Because that, I think, will be helpful.
Yeah, we do have what Ken put together for us as to what
To show
are
exactly the
changed, but
changes.
it's pretty tough to look at, but, yeah.
But it is helpful.
Yes, it is,
That was a nice thing.
yeah.
I know my stack of chicken, what do you call them?
Emails or?
Ordinance, the chicken ordinance,
Chicken ordinance emails have increased greatly. There's
Yeah.
quite a few people who want to keep chickens, which is, I don't know, I guess it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
We've already done research on it. I think we'll have something ready to go as soon as the plan is adopted, and, but we have to get.
Another policy in another town, was it?
South Burlington has a good one, yes. Yeah, so we'll take a look at that once we get to that point. So is there any other business to talk about tonight?
I'll try to be as brief as possible. I saw the email from Nick Warner about the Winooski Valley Park District. It sounds good. It sounds like he wants to involve the town to some degree at least, but I guess we have to wait to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, frankly, I wasn't too thrilled with that because I don't see where they're addressing one of our key issues, and that's the funding formula.
Yep.
It could come out of that process, and hopefully
Yeah.
it will, but they're starting to run out of time.
Okay.
Well, they're aware of what we want.
Concerns, yes, absolutely.
Is there any chance that they could do something, given if we do acquire Catamount land, that they would be involved in doing any kind of maintenance or
Possible.
Yeah.
management as a result of, because then we would get something for our fees, right?
Well, the problem is, if it's not a park if it's a park they don't own, they would charge us an extra fee for managing it. And that's one of the rubs that we've had.
Oh, okay.
If they own the park, then they'll provide the management services for free.
And that's not the plan.
But that is not the plan in this case. Now, that isn't to say they can't have a role, and they very well might, but, we'll have to see.
And our representative on the district was appointed to the committee. So there's obviously lines of communication there. Yeah.
Any other business tonight? If not, the gavel's ready to fall. We're adjourned.
Terry, impressive.
That was incredibly impressive.